Winning their fourth consecutive game, the Seahawks are as hot as any team in the NFL. Have they turned the NFC West into a two-horse race with 4 weeks left to play? I'm going to be breaking it all down here on a Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in late on this Monday evening. Later show than usual. You can thank some crazy travel here on this crazy Monday. Nonetheless, greatly appreciate each and every one of you tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, whether you're in nearby Kent, Washington, or across the country in Fairfax, Virginia. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you. The Seahawks expanding upon their lead in the NFC West by sweeping the Cardinals on Sunday, a 30-18 victory. Have they turned it into a two-horse race in the NFC West? I'll be taking a look at the standings and where things stand from a tiebreaker perspective with 4 weeks left to play in the NFL regular season. We've got a Monday mailbag and, of course, my Monday musings, some in-depth takeaways after looking at the All-22 film, what stood out from yesterday's win for the Seahawks in Glendale. This episode brought your way by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedInNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedInNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Going into Sunday's rematch against the Arizona Cardinals, it truly was a must-win de facto NFC West title game for the Seahawks and the Cardinals. Major playoff leverage, playoff implications in this contest. And fortunately for the 12s, the Seahawks get the job done with a 30-18 victory at State Farm Stadium. They now have unofficially a 3-game lead over the Arizona Cardinals in the NFC West because they won both games in the season series. And when you look at where things stand in this division right now, this is based on NFL.com's percentage probabilities. With that victory in Arizona, the Seahawks currently have a 65% chance of making the postseason. That is obviously the highest in the division. It really helps when you get both those wins against the Arizona Cardinals. Behind them at 7-6 after a big win over the Buffalo Bills yesterday, the Rams have a 30% chance of making the postseason. That looks to be the team right now that is the biggest threat to the Seattle Seahawks. The Cardinals, with that loss, again, this is how much leverage was in this game on Sunday. They dropped down to 9% as far as their chances to make the playoffs. And even with the win over the Bears, the 49ers are coming in last here at 8%. It feels like at this point, they're not eliminated. The Cardinals and 49ers certainly could get hot to close out the season, and they could find a way to sneak into the playoffs as a division champion. But that's the only way either one of those teams, it appears, is going to be able to make the playoffs. And the Seahawks split with the 49ers. They got some advantages there. And I'll mention in a second the biggest advantage that they have. But this does feel like it has turned into a two-horse race. And if the Cardinals would have beat the Seahawks on Sunday, you could make an argument that it is still a two-horse race. That's probably between the Rams and the Cardinals. That is how much weight was on this game. But with the Seahawks getting the victory, they're now 3 games over 500. Obviously have the best record in the division. The Rams still have the tiebreaker on them since they won it at Lumen Field back in Week 9. So that matchup at the end of the season now looms very large. But this feels like a division that now is going to boil down to those two teams, and it's fitting that they could be playing each other with an NFC West championship and maybe the only playoff spot in this division that's going to be up for grabs in Week 18. Of course, the Seahawks have to take care of their business. They've got some really difficult games coming up, starting on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers at Lumen Field. Green Bay has been playing really good football as of late, even losing to the Lions on Thursday Night Football last week. They had the Lions on the ropes late in that game, played them really tough on the road. This is a well-coached team that can put points to the board. They've got some defensive talent as well. They can create turnovers. They can create pressure on opposing quarterbacks. This is going to be a difficult one. And the week after that, you host the Minnesota Vikings, who look like they could be a Super Bowl dark horse in the NFC with Sam Darnold under center, another former Jets quarterback that is lighting it up elsewhere. That team's got weapons galore, particularly in the passing game. They're an opportunistic, aggressive defense as well. So Seattle's got the schedule working against them. They've got some really good teams coming up. And obviously, they finished up with the Rams as well. But Arizona's got some tough games still in the schedule. San Francisco's still got to play Miami, who is technically still in the hunt for a wild card spot in the AFC. They've got a couple of divisional games, including this weekend, the Rams and the 49ers. Look, Seahawks fans might not want to hear this, but this is a game where you need to be rooting for the San Francisco 49ers to, at home, beat the Rams. Because if they can do that, the Rams fall to 7-7 on the season. And if Seattle can find a way to beat Green Bay, you now have a 2-game cushion in the division with 3 games left to play. You do have that head-to-head in the season finale, but this does feel like a game where you root for the 49ers to beat the Rams, not just because they are a game behind them, but also the fact the Seahawks do have that win, that feather in their cap where they did beat the 49ers earlier. And the other reason that really looms large, and this is maybe the biggest reason why, to me, this does feel like a 2-horse race, even though the Cardinals or the 49ers could still find a way to win this division, especially if the Seahawks and Rams choke down the stretch. If they lose multiple games, and either one of those other teams gets hot, they could still win this division, even with those tiebreakers being considered. But the tiebreaker aspect is what creates, to me, a 2-horse race here. The Seahawks are now 3-2 in the NFC West. They have a 4-4 record against NFC opponents, which is better than any of the 3 teams in the NFC West. The Rams are 4-5, Cardinals 3-6, the 49ers 4-5. The Seahawks have the tiebreaker there. In the NFC West standings, the 49ers are 1-3. Even if they win this game against the Rams on Sunday, they're still under 500 in the division. The Cardinals now, because those 2 losses to the Seahawks, are at 2-2. Rams are 2-1. They've still got 3 games in their final 4 against the NFC West. So they can win this division by beating up on their own peers. But Seahawks, Cardinals, 49ers can all play spoiler from that perspective as well. Seattle is much better positioned than it was, say, 2 weeks ago when they had one of the worst conference records in the NFC West and they didn't have the wins in the division. And now they're above 500 with that 3-2 record against the NFC West. If they could get that win against the Rams in week 18, obviously that would be huge, but there's still the 3 weeks before then. I feel like the tiebreakers, though, have really made this a difficult scenario for either the Cardinals or 49ers. Even if they manage to win 3 of their next 4 games, you've still got those tiebreakers working against you. If you tie up with the Seahawks and Rams, they've got those games still going against the Cardinals and the 49ers on their schedule. So these guys can beat up on each other, and that can help the Seahawks as well. So it does feel like this is a race that, even though it's still tight and you've still got all 4 teams within a couple games of each other, there's starting to be some complications here for those bottom 2 teams in terms of those tiebreakers, the conference and divisional records. Head-to-head's not working in their favor either. The Seahawks and Rams, those are the 2 teams that look to be in the driver's seat. With the win on Sunday, Seattle, they are truly in the driver's seat, and the Rams are in the passenger seat. You're trying to keep them there. It's going to be fun to see how this ends up playing out because it's still a tight race, but it does feel like it's Seahawks and Rams right now who are the 2 that are going to be jockeying for position to get probably one playoff spot. Maybe both of them get in, but it's going to be tricky with where things stand with the Packers and Vikings both being clear wild card teams and the Commanders being ahead of those other teams as well. If the Commanders slip up, maybe you do get 2 teams from the NFC West, but feels like that's going to be difficult, that this is going to be a 1-bid division. And so Seattle's going to be hoping they can stay on top in the NFC West. When I come back, going to be tackling your questions in our Monday mailbag. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Hillsdale College. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. And even if you did, it's probably time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed the basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Thankfully, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free, that's right, 40 free online courses including Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper on readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. This episode is also brought your way by Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, Prize Picks is just you against the numbers. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform that offers an injury insurance policy. So even if you have a player go down injured, your lineups are going to stay in play. If you have a player that leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks will keep that lineup live. They also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Do you think that Justin Jefferson's going to get more than 84.5 yards next week, or Lamar Jackson's going to pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns? You could cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in on this late night episode. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. And for your second listen, check out the new and improved Locked On NFL, now twice a day. Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans giving you your morning NFL cup of espresso. And then our good friend from Locked On Jaguars, Tony Wiggins, with the second show, bringing you a good dose of humor and great insight on all 32 NFL teams. That's Locked On NFL, now twice a day. Make sure you're listening on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast, and make it your second listen. Time for our Monday mailbag. We got tons of questions coming off of all of our different social networking platforms. Let's get to them. Our first question here coming from Brian the Butcher on X. Is this season potentially Tyler Lockett's last with us? Save some good money and have depth in the wide receiver room finally. Listen, it's easy to make a jump to conclusions here. When you look at the contract, this is the answer that I will give. First off, Tyler Lockett will not be on this football team next year with the current contract he's got, with that massive cap hit. Look, he's coming off a game he didn't have a single catch, and he was only targeted one time by Geno Smith. He has had a few decent games this season, but he is now clearly the number 3 receiver, maybe number 4 in some regards, because a healthy Noah Fant seems to be getting more opportunities from Geno Smith. He is at the stage of his career where he is clearly no longer in his prime, but there's still value. And I still believe there's going to be a game down the stretch here where he is going to come through with a number of catches, because he might not be the deep threat that he once was, but he still could be a reliable chain mover. I expect that we're still going to see some of those flashes. He is still one of the very best number 3 receivers in the NFL. As far as his future goes, though, I think if he wants to stay in Seattle, he's going to be approached about taking a big pay cut or trying to do some kind of an extension that's going to ease that cap burden. If he's not willing to do that, then the Seahawks have proven in the past that they are willing to release iconic players when they are past their prime. We've seen him do it with players like Bobby Wagner. There's been other ones as well. This could be another instance where the Seahawks end up making that difficult decision. But I think it's too early to say whether he's going to be here next year or not. If he understands what his role is now and he's willing to take a pay cut and wants to play another season, it's possible that could happen. But on his current contract, yes, I would say that this is probably going to be the end of the line. The Seahawks are going to be asking for some cutback on that salary cap. We'll see what ends up happening on that front. But he is definitely in the twilight years of his career, still has value, but he's clearly the number 3 receiver for the Seahawks right now. Next question from T. Muller Forever on X. Obviously, Seattle had success running the ball in Arizona, and last game versus the Jets was also not so bad. Do you think Seattle actually finds some rhythm running the ball? How confident are you they can replicate such success against the Packers? So the first part of that question here, do you think Seattle actually has found a rhythm running the football? I do. And I mentioned this last week coming out of the Jets game. It was the first time really all season that I had optimism about where this run game was at. And really what got me most excited was that the second half of that Jets game, the fact the offensive line was creating some push. We actually saw them getting defensive linemen pushed off the ball, and they were getting guards and tackles climbing up to the second level and getting the linebackers. We had not seen that consistently. And then in this last game, I will admit, going back and watching the All-22, the second half, things dried up quite a bit. The offensive line was not as effective. I think some of that was adjustments made by Arizona, though, and not enough adjustments made by Seattle. Those shotgun runs started to dry up a little bit, but the ability to get their guards and tackles, particularly Satoa Lamea and Abraham Lucas, out there on pulling guard and pulling tackle assignments, either trap blocking off the end or turning up field and being a lead blocker, they were having a ton of success with those counter tray plays. They ran a ton of them that game. They had success the duo the week before. I feel like you're starting to see this run game find a little bit of an identity. Is it going to be one that's going to be a top 15, top 10 caliber run offense every week from here on out? I would not go that far, but I think that you have finally started to see Ryan Grubb starting to figure out what the bread and butter is for this offense in terms of how they can match the personnel. I think Lamea has made an impact there. Abe Lucas is getting better every single game as he gets his legs back underneath him. Oluwatimi is doing some nice things out there. So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, and yet you can be guarded as well in this next game because Green Bay's got a really good defensive line. Detroit was able to run the ball on them fairly well, but Detroit's also got probably the best offensive line in the NFL in front of two really good backs in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So we shall see, but this is going to be a real litmus test to see if the Seahawks have really made progress with their run game or not, going against a stout Green Bay Packers defense. Murphy on Blue Sky. What do you think is allowing Tyrese Knight to play so well early in his career? What traits are making his transition smoother than expected? Well, as far as traits, look, you either have a nose for the football or you don't. Guys don't come into the NFL, or at least not very often, come into the NFL without that skill and then develop it in the NFL. Like, it just doesn't happen. You don't make 140 tackles in a season at the college level by mistake. And when you turn on the tape in the college game, Tyrese Knight was one of those guys that just always seemed to be around the football. He found ways to get around blocks, to shed blocks, and find his way to ball carriers pretty much on the regular every play at college level. And you have seen that carry over here in the NFL, the nose for the football. I think the instincts, even for me, and I was higher on him than a lot of people were in the pre-draft process, but I think that those instincts have played out much better on the field in an NFL defense than I think anybody envisioned this early. It just seems like the kid's he's got the football IQ. He's got the understanding. He knows how to decipher what other teams are doing. And with that, you always play faster when you're instinctive. And so you're seeing that. And I think the other thing about this guy, when he hits you, it's like running into a brick wall. Like, he just doesn't miss tackles. He didn't at UTEP. It is carried over. That is translated to the NFL. When he hits guys, they go down. And so I think those traits, the fact he's been better with the instincts than I think anybody envisioned. And you know what? If you're an NFL defender and when you hit people, they go down, you're going to be lauded for that. That is a huge aspect of the linebacker position. And so I think that those are the two things that have really helped. And as far as surprises, I can't say I've been surprised by the athleticism because you saw that on tape, but just how polished he has looked in coverage. The pass breakup he had against Marvin Harrison Jr. yesterday, for example, come out of the slot. Like, there's never many linebackers in the NFL that are going to be making that play. And so you can see the athleticism, you can see the coverage skills. There's just a lot to be excited about with this kid. And I think you've seen a lot of things he did at UTEP. Some wondered if he would be able to do that in the NFL. Clearly, those have been transferable skills, especially with Mike McDonald and the staff coaching him up. Trevor on Blue Sky, who is your dark horse to watch in the college football playoff? It's crazy to think that one of the top 12 teams would be viewed as a dark horse, but there's definitely a few that come to mind. I'm still going to say my number one dark horse is Indiana. I know that they laid an egg against Ohio State a few weeks back. You take a couple special teams miscues out, and that's a much different game. It felt like some of those mistakes, the snowball got going, and then Indiana couldn't get anything going. But I really like their quarterback, Curtis Rourke. He's a guy that I think has a future in the NFL, at least as a backup, maybe a starter in the NFL. I see a lot of traits that I think are translatable to the league. Really quick release, very smart, doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, takes good care of the football, has above average arm talent. He's a good athlete at 6'5", 220 plus pounds. So he's got size and athleticism. And they've got some playmakers on both sides of the football. That is a good football team. And the other dark horse to me, Arizona State, because has there been a team that's playing better football the last 5 or 6 weeks than the Sun Devils have been? They've got a great running back, Stabo. If you like physical running backs that break tackles, Stabo is your guy. They've got some nasty physical players on defense, a few playmakers on the outside. Arizona State is a team I would keep an eye on too, but Indiana, Arizona State. I don't consider Boise State a sleeper. That's a team that is the number 3 seed, and they had Oregon on the ropes. I don't think anybody's going to be sleeping on them going to this tournament, but Arizona State and Indiana would be the 2 big sleepers for me. Home Chicks on X, after the Seahawks beat the Packers on Sunday night, somebody is confident. Do you think the Hawks will get any national love for what they are doing? Currently seems like everyone is, oh, that's cute, and moves on. I wouldn't necessarily say that's what's going on. I think that the national narrative is starting to change already. And I'm just saying this based on some of the games that have been on TV and just hearing people talk about the Seahawks and preparing for that Seahawks-Packers game next week, talking about Geno Smith leading the NFL in passing yards, for example. I think there are some people that are catching on to this team. Now, if they go out and Green Bay beats them bad or it's not a competitive game, that noise is going to quickly be silenced. If they find a way to beat the Packers, though, I do think that narrative is already starting to lean that way. This is one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. So if they can find a way to beat Green Bay, I think that noise is already building. You could start to see the national narrative change where people are going to start taking the Seahawks seriously as a dark horse at the NFL level to keep an eye on. Our last question here for the mailbag coming from Skylar on Blue Sky. How much do you think McDonald's smart personnel decisions over the course of the season have helped with the players buying in? I think it's been a huge difference maker here over the last month. He has pushed the button right, has made the correct decisions pretty much every time when he's made moves with personnel. If you look at the linebacker spots, replacing Jerome Baker with Ernest Jones, that's been a home run. Replacing Tyrell Dodson with Tyrese Knight. I talk about how well he's playing as a rookie. That has been a home run. You look at the secondary. Trey Brown goes down with an ankle injury for a week, wants his job back. Well, I'm going to see what Josh Jobe can do. Josh Jobe goes out, and all Josh Jobe has done after 6 starts, he's in the top 20 among qualified corners in completion percentage against, in passer rating against, and in yards after the catch. He has been excellent. Certainly he has made it that Mike Macdonald hasn't regretted giving him the starting job and keeping him in the lineup. Kobe Bryant playing at safety and keeping him in the starting lineup when Rayshon Jenkins came back. He continues to deliver big plays in the secondary. And the most recent one, you've got Anthony Bradford who goes down. Christian Haynes seems like he's the natural fit at right guard. But you know what? Mike Macdonald likes what he's seen in the practice field from Satoa Lamea better. Lamea, you earned this opportunity. When you have that kind of a hit rate at different positions, the punt and kick returner's another one this week, making those choices. First off, it creates accountability for your players. Like, whoa, like we aren't performing. This is what's going to happen to us. They're going to find somebody that will perform. I do think that anytime that you're making decisions like this, there is some risk because if they don't pan out, players are going to start losing confidence in your ability to coach and make the right decisions. But he has been clicking on all cylinders with these personnel choices. John Schneider deserves credit as well for what he's done in making these personnel moves from a front office perspective. But Mike Macdonald has pushed all the right buttons when it's come to getting those personnel decisions made. And so that is going to win in the locker room. Players are going to see these results and like, hey, our coach knows what he's doing. He's putting the right guys in the right spots to succeed. And if you don't perform, we're going to find somebody that's going to do that. And I think it creates accountability. And I think it is part of a positive culture building a football team at any level. You want your players to see that you know what you're doing. He has made those right decisions. When I come back, I'm going to flip the script back to Sunday's win over the Cardinals. We've got some Monday musings, my observations coming out of the All-22. It's never as good or never as bad as you think on offense, defense, and special teams. Going to break down some of my takeaways after watching the All-22. That'll be coming up next year on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Get ready to tackle the last 5 weeks of NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Noah Fant scoring his first touchdown since the end of the 2022 season, or DK Metcalf being the first player in the game on Sunday night against the Packers with a 30-plus yard reception. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more this holiday season with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s staying up late this evening to check out the latest installment of Locked On Seahawks. We greatly appreciate making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks getting their second win of the season against the Cardinals, a season sweep, 30-18 at State Farm Stadium on Sunday. And ultimately, that gives the Seahawks what amounts to a 3-game lead over the Arizona Cardinals because they have the head-to-head tiebreaker winning both of those matchups. There's still a game in front of the LA Rams. The Rams do have the tiebreaker in that sense. As I mentioned earlier, kind of creates this two-headed horse dynamic really at the top of the NFC West with 4 games left to play. But there's no question this was a huge win for the Seahawks. If they don't win this game, we're talking less than a 10% chance of making the playoffs right now, according to NFL.com, at 65%. And any time that I turn on the All-22, it's never as good as you thought. It's never as bad as you thought. Whether you're looking for positives or negatives, it's never quite to the extreme as what you thought, at least most of the time. But there is one thing that stood out to me watching this tape, and it's coming out of the game yesterday. We mentioned it on the post-game show. The offensive line in general played really well. I thought Satoa Lamea played a fantastic football game. And then you turn on the All-22, and this was an instance where it may have been better than what I thought it was. The physicality and really the thing, look, I watched Lamea play at Utah a lot. Being a out West reporter, I have seen a lot of formerly Pac-12 games, a lot of those teams I've watched extensively. Utah, I've watched quite a bit, and I have a lot of respect for the way they coach their offensive line. But Satoa Lamea, I did not expect to see the athleticism that I have seen these last 2 weeks, especially yesterday. He just looked like he was playing more free with more confidence. I mean, he was second start. It's a big difference from that first regular season game after being a healthy scratch all year long until that game in New Jersey. But he was getting after it. And there's several plays that stand out. There were a couple of those counter trays where he was making kick-out blocks, and he executed them perfectly. I mean, Zach Charbonnet's 51-yard touchdown, he pancaked the defender and would not let him get up. And that's that nastiness that's been missing from this offensive line. And there was a play late in the game that Zach Charbonnet, if he could have outran the safety that was coming from behind in pursuit from the back end, he had Lamea about 15 yards in front of him. That was the play that kind of jumped out to me on athleticism. Like, this guy can fly. He can really move. There was a couple screens they ran where he was able to get to that next level. He is just a very athletic guard that plays with physicality. I thought he was really crisp in pass protection yesterday as well. I mean, they gave up 2 quarterback hits as an offensive line. He was a big reason for that. He picked up some stunts that the Cardinals threw at him. So, look, I'm just going to say this. It's 2 games. It's too early to say that this is your long-term starter. I need more before I can say that. But I am really excited about what I've seen these first 2 starts for Satoa Lamea, who is already playing way better than either one of the guards that played on the right side at any point this season. He looks more confident. He's playing with more physicality, and he's athletic. He is checking off all the boxes you're looking for. And I think he is the reason, the big reason the running game is starting to click, because he's creating push. He's knocking guys to the turf. He's keeping them on the turf, and you can get him to the second level, both on screens and zone gap plays, whatever you want to say, or whatever you want to run. He can climb off combos. He can go up and he can get guys. That is really changing things for Seattle's run game. So Satoa Lamea, he, to me, looks like absolutely the real deal. Second observation I have on offense, we've talked about this really since Ryan Grubb was hired way back in March. And the idea that maybe Zach Charbonnet is a better fit for his offense than Ken Walker III. Now, coming out of training camp and preseason, Ken Walker was clearly the undisputed starter. He's been the starter all season long when he's been healthy. And this is not a knock on Ken Walker III. But I'm starting to wonder if this idea, I've kind of scoffed at it a little bit. My co-host Rob Rang, Connor Benintendi, Nick Lee, all three of them have kind of argued maybe Charbonnet is a better fit. And I've kind of pushed back against it because to me, Ken Walker III is just such a dynamic athlete. He can hit home runs that nobody else in Seattle's roster is going to be able to hit. Very few running backs in the league are going to be able to hit. But now we've got 3 starts with Zach Charbonnet. His first one in New England, he got kind of minimal production in that game, under 40 rushing yards. But he had 91 rushing yards his second start against the Miami Dolphins, scored a couple touchdowns in that game. This game, he goes for 134 yards. He had 7 catches for 59 yards out of the backfield. And he scored 2 touchdowns, including a 51-yarder. So he showed he's got the long speed to be able to hit a home run if he gets the blocking in front. And he broke a ton of tackles. I counted 8 on the tape. So you're wondering if this idea of him being a better fit for this offense, maybe it's not a myth at this point, because now you've got a big enough sample size. The last couple starts in particular he's ran hard. He is decisive. He hits the hole. He breaks tackles. And that's kind of similar to what we saw at Washington the last couple of years. They didn't necessarily have the splashy, flashy runner. They had the one that would get downhill, would break tackles, be patient with his blocks. So maybe this is not a myth at this point. And I'm not saying that you bench Ken Walker III, but I'm certainly saying maybe you split the pie a little bit more. And if Charbonnet continues to play this way, you might have no choice. If you're going to the hot hand, he might be the one that has the chance to do that in this offensive scheme. As for the defensive side of the football, a few things that jumped out of me. Let's talk a little bit about the dirty work defensive linemen, because I think when you're looking at Seattle's success, it's very easy to point out Leonard Williams, and he deserves all the credit he's getting. He has been fantastic the last 3 or 4 games. He has been a catalyst for this defensive surge. The linebacker changes have certainly helped as well. Boye Maffe's had some splashy plays. So is Derek Hall. But there's 2 guys in particular that I don't think we're talking about enough. Jonathan Hankins, the guy's been an immovable object the last 4 or 5 weeks. He is the veteran nose tackle they didn't have last year. He has been able to give them some 2 gapping, some 1 gapping. He's been able to do a little bit of everything. He's not playing a ton of snaps right now, but that's probably how you want it. You want him to play early down snaps, and then you can rotate guys in when you get second and third and long situations. But when he's been in there, he's been effective. And he also had an effort sack after Boye Mafe missed the opportunity to bring down Kyler Murray yesterday. Hankins finished it up. So he has given them some unexpected pass rushing contributions. And then the other player, Roy Robertson Harris, only played 12 snaps yesterday. But Mike McDonald even mentioned him this morning on his interview on Seattle Sports, that he is a guy that allows the Seahawks to move Leonard Williams around the way they are right now, because he can play that 5-tech role. He can play 3-tech, slide inside, and he can do some of that dirty work. He's not going to give you gaudy stats. He's not going to get a bunch of sacks, not going to get a bunch of tackles for loss, but he's going to play rock solid football. He's going to be fundamentally sound, and it allows you to have that flexibility to move Leonard Williams around and let him do what he's been doing the last 3 or 4 games, moving up and down the line, terrorizing offensive linemen. So I feel like Robertson, Harris, and Hankins, those are 2 guys that aren't getting much attention because they're not going to put up gaudy stats, not going to be guys that have defensive player of the week performances, but they are integral parts in making this defense function correctly and being able to move guys around and let them do what they do. Leonard Williams being the most notable example. And last but not least, it's crazy that we're mentioning this. The Cardinals had that 41-yard touchdown pass in the opening drive, and it felt like, oh boy, this could be a different game. Seattle didn't give up another catch the entire rest of the game of more than 20 yards. And that, to me, it goes to the secondary as a whole. But I thought in this game in particular, the corners did an excellent job. Devin Witherspoon had great coverage. coverage all day long. Josh Jobe gave up one catch the entire day. He was playing sticky coverage. Reek Woolen was playing really good coverage for the most part. There were a few mistakes here, but here and there, he drew an offensive pass interference penalty that I think would have been a pick six without that penalty. So if I'm Arizona's coaching staff, I'm totally fine with that penalty because of what could have happened there. These corners are playing at a really high level, and they're taking away those explosive plays. That first touchdown obviously being the exception, but the fact that they were able to rebound from that and have another game where they are not giving up those explosive plays downfield, that has been a big part of the success here for Seattle, giving up less than 14 points per game on defense during this 4-game winning streak. Look no further than those cornerbacks that continue to play at a really high level, and all three of them have different skill sets that are complementing one another, and that is making this defense that much better heading into this final stretch run. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be rejoined by Rob Rang. Hopefully no more travel issues, and we will be diving into our Tell the Truth Tuesday final takeaways and pulling back the curtain and taking a look at the Green Bay Packers for the first time heading into Week 15. Make sure you're listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Go Hawks.